So first of all, thank you so much to anyone that wrote in or added a tip donation to my last video. Um, Been through some really rough times the past couple months, and I got to a point where I didn't think I was gonna get up from this one. I literally was at a point where I didn't even have money for food, so like thank you for like feeding me literally. And just having like a small amount of time, like a week, to sort of like step back and think about how I can move the channel forward was immensely helpful. It was kind of like starving out in the wilderness and then finding this like small stash of food to like get you through the point of figuring out how to get yourself back. But anyways, I talked about how I really don't want to have to do shorts. But it's kind of interesting because I've oftentimes found in life that it always works better to start with whatever your ideal is and then work back from there rather than thinking about what you think is practical or realistic and then trying to like squash your ideal into that, compromise somehow. And in this case, it was kind of like I didn't want to make shorts. I don't like shorts, but I knew that I needed to make shorts in order for the channel to survive because like YouTube is pushing them so much that like my videos a lot of the times aren't even getting shown anymore, so it doesn't matter how good they are if no one's seeing them. So like my first thought, and I have tried shorts before, but it was just like too much extra work. I'm making my like my normal aspect ratio 16:9 videos, which I like, and then I was trying to do the shorts on top of that, like filming things in a vertical format, and it just wasn't accomplishing anything right because I was just having to work harder for the same amount of money for something I didn't even want to do. So then I thought to myself, like, okay, how can I make shorts without making shorts? And I realized like I can just chop up my old videos and make them into vertical format, shorter videos. And I actually had tried that before, but again, like I was trying to be too perfect with it, and it was annoying me that I had horizontal videos and then they were like getting cut off, so you can only see like part of the barefoot shoe, and so that's why I stopped doing them before. But then I was just like what if it doesn't matter? What if I can just do the absolute minimum amount of effort to do this thing that I don't want to do, which it turns out it only took me about, I don't know, 15 minutes per day to post like 5 shorts, 4 or 5 shorts, from chopping up my barefoot reviews into little sections like features and testing alternatives. And it really felt like I wasn't even making shorts at all because it was something that I was able to do so quickly. And so like this is sort of what I got from this break that you guys afforded me when I was like on the verge of completely giving up on YouTube because my financial situation was so hopeless and I just really didn't want to do shorts. But I realize like I just had so much built up potential that I wasn't taking advantage of that didn't require any extra work. It's kind of like when I first started working with this naturopath, one of the first things she told me was about the idea of like bound nutrients. Like you can have bound copper in your body, like you could have all this stored copper, but it's not in a form that you can use, and so it feels like you don't have any copper at all, but you have to find a way to like liberate the copper so that it can be used. And it was the same thing with shorts, like I had this massive treasure trove of old videos that I hadn't done anything with in terms of editing them into shorter segments, and then as soon as I did that, it was like I had this thing that I could do every day to get so many more views, so much more revenue. Not that I'm ever gonna make a killing at YouTube, but just in terms of like having what I need to live a simple basic life, which is all that I really want. So anyways, I started having some really good days. I was spending time at my dad's house, who there are some problems with my relationship with my dad, like the fact that he's addicted to chewing tobacco and like watches 4 to 6 hours of television per day because he's so depressed and eats a poor quality diet, etc. But I get along with my dad so much easier than I get along with my mom. Probably partly because he raised me, and he's like very laissez-faire, whereas my mom's a chronic micromanager. So yeah, I have a harder time. But anyways, I was living in the van and working in the van, which had been really amazing. And then on top of that, like, you guys gave me that just like week to think about things and come up with new ideas. And I was also working really hard on the van while I was doing the short stuff, and things were moving in such a positive direction. I was like, one of those moments where you'd become really hopeless, and then things, like, you see a ray of sunshine through the clouds, and there's like, it illuminates the path that you need to take to move forward in life. So things were going really well, and I was spending almost no time on YouTube, which felt great because I have grown very tired of editing videos, especially doing it every day. I mean, I like YouTubing, it's just I don't like sitting in front of a screen for like 4 hours a day. I mean, a lot of people work even more than that in front of a screen, which I used to as well when I was a freelancer, and that's just like a nightmare to me. Like 2 hours feels like a lot of time to sit in front of a computer these days, even though I've got an e-ink monitor and everything. It's just like I feel happier the more I'm like out in nature, away from computers, away from screens. So I was just working on the van build a lot, like 14 hours a day some days. And I finished the floor. I got this really beautiful black walnut stain with some rust in there, and it looks like aged barn wood. And then I started on the cabinets for the wood stove, and I'm gonna have like a barefoot shoe rack on the right side of the van in the front by the cargo door. And then I'm gonna have a sitting area back towards the desk. And I was coming up with all these really good ideas. Like, I had been attached to the idea of using my desk that you've seen in videos, the black walnut one, but it's really heavy, and it's also not really made to be in the van. I mean, it fits, but you kind of have to like shoehorn it awkwardly, and it didn't really match the wood floor that I had come up with, the pine. So I came up with the idea of just like making a new desk, just like letting go of old ideas as much as you really love them. Like, the walnut desk, it didn't fit the van. And so I thought, like, if I make it out of pine, it's so much lighter. And then I had this cool idea of, like, if it's thinner, if it's not so thick as the walnut desk, then I could move it up and down, right? So I could have the 2 back windows behind me, and then I can move the desk down and turn it into like a seating area, like a whole wraparound couch area for when I didn't want to use the desk, and just like completely get my whole computer setup out of the way, so I wasn't even thinking about it, so I could have like this clear on-off switch. So anyways, everything was going well. I had enough money to buy food, which is always important. And I like figured out how to scale back my food expenses so that I could just eat like ground beef in the short term. Like, I was buying bison, it's really expensive, so that's like a good short-term solution as well, to just kind of like weather the storm until hopefully shorts and other stuff gets the channel back up to where I have enough revenue for what I want, the van life build and food and etc. But anyways, I was just noticing that I was sneezing more and more, and like coughing, and my lungs were burning, and I kind of thought it was the fires in Canada, which I'm sure that was part of it. But then I thought, well, maybe it's like I'm still reacting to raw dairy, because I know I'm really allergic to pasteurized dairy, but raw dairy was better, and so I quit that, thinking maybe that was part of the problem, and I think it helped a little bit. But there was still something going on. And then I just began to notice, like, every time I cut plywood, because I was using a lot of plywood for the side kind of cabinets and wood stove mount and whatnot, every time I cut plywood, I would just start sneezing like crazy. My throat would burn, my eyes were just itchy, and I knew that plywood had glue in it, so it's not ideal, but I thought, okay, well, once I cut it, once I paint it, it won't be a problem. But I was having so many symptoms dealing with it that I decided to research plywood. I don't know why I didn't do this before, but yeah. Do you know what they use to affix layers of plywood together, formaldehyde, fucking embalming fluid, and it is as cancerous as hell, and it's completely toxic. And what's even worse about it is that it's not just the dust that it produces when you're cutting it, it actually continues to off gas, even if you cover it up with paint for, years. So I was also noticing that I was just like having real problems, like sneezing and coughing, and in the van, like even when I wasn't cutting the plywood. So I woke up one day a few days ago and I was like, shit, I'm gonna have to undo everything that I did, take out all of the plywood. So I lost like an entire week of work, essentially, and that was really discouraging. After like all of the things that have happened, with like losing revenue from the light phone, and just like YouTube pushing shorts, and barefoot companies going out of business, and the tariffs, and like everything, just like chronic health problems, chronic joint pain, etc. It's like just one thing after another, and I get so tired of feeling like I can't even go to the store and buy something without it like turning out a week later that's completely toxic. And how evil do you have to be as a company, as multiple companies that are putting this stuff in billions of homes around the world, to use embalming fluid, cancer-causing embalming fluid, as the fixative? It's like, oh my God. Like, my critical mistake here, which is a mistake that I've made a lot, even though I'm getting better at it, is someone who cares about natural health and non-toxic living and so forth. I just sometimes assume that companies can't possibly be as evil as they are, as like if I was making plywood for the first time, there's just no way in hell that I would think to use cancer-causing embalming fluid as the fixative. Like I wouldn't even think of that. And then you see it in stores and there's no like toxic label on it or anything. And so in your mind, you're thinking, well, like everyone's using this, it must be safe, even though I know that that's almost never the case. It's like barefoot shoes. Everyone's running in cushion shoes that are destroying their feet, and they're, pointy, but they're sold everywhere, So the assumption when I was a kid is that it must be healthy, but it's not. It's just mass delusion of everyone harming themselves with toxic products and thinking that it's okay because everyone else is doing it. The worst part though is because I have so many expenses from just trying to eat a high quality diet, and my van payment is like $620 a month. It's like almost rent level. I had no money left to buy new wood. Like I had been trying to use this plywood that I had left over. I had bought like one board of plywood, but mostly I was using scraps left over from other projects, and that was really nice because I didn't have to spend any money. Yeah, I just realized like it was going to be probably another month until I'd have enough money to buy wood to do anything with a van. So at that point I was just like, screw it. I've been putting off taking my van to the garage. First of all, it needs a New York State inspection, which is overdue, and I was kind of like playing with fire, trying to work on the van build as much as possible while it's still warm before it gets to winter. But then also there's this electrical issue that's been going on where it makes this shuttering noise. Like if you open the driver's side door, it'll go It wasn't a huge deal, but it was kind of driving me crazy because it does it at random times too. Like at 2 a.m. in the morning, it'll just suddenly go like it'll like shake the van, and then sometimes there's this beeping noise. And it was one of those things, like, you ever have one of those things in your life where it's not a big deal, but it just is like a metaphor for like how the rest of your life, like all the problems in the rest of your life, the disorganization, like the debt or the stress or whatever it is. And so like this kind of like sound going off in my van was driving me crazy like that. It just felt like it was connected to every other stressful thing that was happening in my life, especially because it was so random. Like I would open the back door and get into the van, and sometimes it wouldn't do it, but then sometimes like 30 seconds later there would go again, like and there was this feeling of helplessness, like you couldn't figure out what to do about it. I took it into the dealer before, and they replaced the battery, but it didn't solve the problem, so it just kept going on and on and on and on. And so anyways, I realized like I just had to bite the bullet and take it into the dealer. So yesterday I had my last day of van life for either a week or 2 weeks or maybe 3 weeks. Last time I took it in, they told me that it could take up to a month, which is like a nightmare. Hopefully they're not that busy, but I had to move all of my shit out of the van and back into my mom's bedroom, which was just an absolute nightmare right now. I need to clean it, but there's just so much stuff. And it was really depressing. It's not just about the week or 2 weeks or however long that I'll have to spend in there away from the van. It just feels like I'm going backwards in life. And also like the bedroom, my mom's bedroom, is this place that I was stuck for like literally 7 years. So it stresses me out moving back into there, because I think like, what if something goes wrong and I just like end up being a prisoner in here? What if I lost the van? Like I don't even know that I could recover from that, because you think about how long it would take me to save up the money to get another van. Like if I defaulted on my loan because I didn't have enough money, that it'd be soul crushing. Like I said in the other video, I think at that point I would just like disappear into the woods, and that would be the end of me. Maybe I would make some vlogs, once in a while out in the wilderness. But yeah, being without the van for even a day now has made me appreciate how much better it was in the van, even though the van wasn't completely finished. Like being able to work in there with 2 windows on either side and windows in front of me, and the light coming in from the Max Air fan above me, and just like feeling warm, because my mom's house is just freezing cold all the time. She keeps the AC really high, and like my feet are like literally turning blue, unless I wear socks. And it's like the middle of summer and it'll be like 90 degrees outside, and I'm freezing cold in the inside. And that was something that I appreciated so much about the van, was just, it was always warm. I don't mind being too hot. I would much rather be too warm than too cold. And just the feeling of having my own space too, like not needing to come out here under an umbrella when it's raining in order to make a video, to have enough personal space to talk about the things that I want to talk about. So anyways, back to the build. I think the thing that I'm going to do is make everything out of pine boards. So like instead of using giant sheets of plywood, I'm going to do tongue and groove and put, like multiple vertical layers of like 6-inch pine boards together. And it's more work, but it's 100% non-toxic. And like the older I get, the more I just like finding these solutions that are like 100% natural. I don't like 80% natural, 70% natural. It's just like, I just want things to be pure and simple and natural, the way that human beings are supposed to live. Also, back to the other video with everyone who responded, like, again, thank you so much. I've been trying to reply to everyone, but I got like over 100 comments, and I keep getting more every day, not only from that video but from my regular videos, which I'm always trying to respond to every single one of those as well. But especially with the past video, like when someone makes, when someone tips me, or when someone takes the time to write a long response, with support or advice or whatever, I don't just want to write back like, oh, thanks, and just like put a heart or a thumbs up on the comment. I feel like I should write something back, but it can be kind of hard because you don't always know much at all about a person. Sometimes all you get is a profile picture and they don't have anything on their YouTube channel. Or you don't even have the profile picture and it's just someone's like username. So it can be kind of mentally taxing to try to come up with something unique to say back to every single one. And then for the people who do have YouTube channels, I always like to go to their channel and at least watch 1 or 2 videos and like see what they're about. And so yeah, that's why it's taking me a while to write back to everyone, but I will 100% get to you. And again, like, thank you so much for giving me the time to think about all this stuff, so I didn't feel like I was getting like crushed by all the stress, and especially worrying about defaulting on my loan with the van, which would have been an absolute disaster. How do you like this shot of the umbrella? Well, maybe it'll put me out of my misery. Yeah, my mom didn't find that one funny. It's another thing we don't have in common. I have a dark sense of humor, if you haven't noticed. But I guess it's kind of relevant to one other thing that I wanted to talk about, which is like, I did see a lot of the comments, like, people are really supportive when I make videos like this, where it's just me talking about my life and just whatever's going on, because I think people are sort of craving just like honesty, you know, not people pretending to be perfect and having all the answers to everything 24/7, which is what more and more people are doing nowadays. They just wear sort of like the makeup, whether it's literal makeup or YouTube filmmaking makeup, where they're only showing you the best parts of their life and they're making everything seem perfect and magical all the time. So yeah, a lot of people on the channel seem to like these types of videos, but some people don't like them. They seem to sort of get annoyed or offended by me talking about things that I don't like, that are going on in my life, or that are stressing me out, or that I don't have solutions for. And particularly, I find that like people who are in the older demographic in my audience, maybe like 40 to 50, sometimes get incensed that I'm complaining about, you know, my living situation when I'm living at my mom's house, because they think like my mom is being so generous, you know, which is true for sure. But the way I see it is sort of like, if you imagine a tiger that is at a zoo, you know, it's never going to be as happy as a tiger out in the wild. And if tigers were capable of complaining, they probably would complain about the quality of the food, you know, the lack of space, the fact that there are always people around watching them. And so even though they might feel sort of grateful to the zookeeper for doing their job, for bringing them food every day, because obviously they would die, you know, without food and shelter, like, they're still trapped in this unnatural situation. So when I make these videos, especially when I'm talking about my parents, there's really nothing that I'm like criticizing them for or complaining about, like, as related to them themselves. It's just the system that we find ourselves in that results in people becoming trapped like this. You know, my parents didn't really have a choice. They never had access to YouTube to find all of this information about natural health and stuff like that. It's like, where are you going to learn that from if you're living in society where everything is mainstream and, you know, there are no like rebellious voices at the library or at school? I mean, you can still find it, but you would have to do a lot more work, a lot more digging than you do nowadays. And so, you know, it's not their fault. I mean, they're in a sense like zookeepers for me. They're zookeepers for themselves in another way. And that's what's kind of horrifically unique about the human race, is that we're the only species on planet Earth that willingly puts ourselves in an unnatural habitat, that willingly becomes our own prison guards. Anyways, I'm really glad that you guys gave me the time to think about the whole short strategy, because it seems like it's working. It seems like people like these short little snippets that are kind of like, I don't know, teasers for the main video, or ways of sharing information faster. And I guess at the end of the day, it's just another thing where it's the quality of the content that really matters, rather than what aspect ratio it is or where it's showing up, etc. And I feel like if I didn't have the time to come up with that solution, and I had been in the place where I was, having completely run out of money, and then have this thing, you know, the straw that broke the camel's back, that was already broken with the formaldehyde plywood, and not having any money to do anything with a van life build, and feeling like I had to take my van into the dealer and lose it, you know, so I didn't get pulled over by the cops. If I had to deal with all that without having this solution of shorts, and being able to do that while I was at my mom's house, so that I didn't have to make videos constantly in this place where I don't really feel inspired, and I a lot of times feel more stressed, you know, like it would have been crushing. But as it is, I have a little more time day to day to think about, you know, how to move the channel forward, rather than just being stuck in the daily grind, because I can post the shorts so quickly, and it just helps keeps the views up and the revenue up without me having to grind myself to death. So again, thank you guys so much for sticking along with me on this journey, and hopefully we'll get the van back in 2 or 3 weeks. And I really don't have that much left to do to winterize it. Like, that's the main goal, to be able to move into this space that is completely my own, and honestly just to slow down with the van life build and maybe work on my sci-fi book, because once I get the walls up and just some like basic cabinetry to put the wood stove on, you know, there's nothing that I 100% need like right now. And then I'll feel really good to be able to enjoy that. So thank you guys for watching. New videos coming soon. Peace.